Hello, everybody. The Lawn Gnome is here, and it is time to send in the clowns. If you are new to my channel, I just want to say welcome. It is a pleasure to have you watching us today for the 6th episode of my channel segment called Versus, in which I strategically pit two things against one another with a nice panel to join me who is knowledgeable in the subject to see exactly what will come out on top. Because of the fact that we are about to welcome 2017's Halloween, I thought that it would be such a shame if we didn't focus on one of the biggest movies based on one of the biggest books in the horror genre. And of course, that is Stephen King's legendary monster of a book, if you will. That is it. And going on almost 2 months at the box office is the Andy Muschietti directed film of the same name, It. So I'm looking forward to doing this today. It's going to definitely be a fun battle, but before we get into the meat of this video, I also want to say that my panelists today couldn't have been two of the more perfect choices because we've got a booktuber against a YouTube film critic. So we've got the experts finally going up against each other, full throttle, full force. So let's, of course, start off with the panelists introducing themselves. And of course, as always, we have to go with the original source material. So let's start with the defender of the book.
Hello, my name is Alex. I run a YouTube channel called Alex's Fiction Addiction. I am predominantly a booktuber, but I am now starting to branch into my film and TV tastes as well. In South London, so I am the only on this live show, but hopefully I will be able to defend the book of It by Stephen King. Stephen King is one of my favorite authors, so I am quite well versed in his other works as well. So I'm really looking forward to this book versus film battle. So yeah, really excited.
And just a little bit of a fun fact, thanks to Alex, who is someone who has been subscribed to me for a while now, and vice versa, we actually buddy read the book together. Because I knew that that was a book that I had to finally read when I found out that the movie was finally coming into fruition. And I'm a firm believer in don't judge a book by its movie. So I just wanted to say, Alex, thank you very much for buddy reading the book with me because it definitely was a lot of fun. But we also have our other panelists, and that, of course, is the defender of the new film sensation based on the same book.
Yes, so hello, my name is Maria, and I host the channel called CineClub, where I review movies and certain elements of each movie as well, and recently made a video comparing Bill Skarsgård and Tim Curry. I'm here to defend the movie from 2017, which is a harder job, I think, than for Alex, because everybody knows the book is always the best choice, and I have to prove to you somehow that the movie was better. So I am ready for it, and let's get this started. I'm ready for this, Alex.
Absolutely, absolutely. And one of the other things that I do specifically want to mention is I'm so happy that we actually managed to stick to our schedule and get this live show going today because of the fact that Maria is a resident of Puerto Rico. And we all know that Puerto Rico has been going through some really tough times lately. So we want to let everybody know that if you want to help and continue to do what we can to donate to get Puerto Rico back up and running, they're coming together slowly but surely. Let's forget about politics. Let's forget about all of the conspiracy business. This is all about people helping people and getting some good people on this earth back up and running. And I'm glad to know that my school that I work for is doing a wonderful deed by allowing Puerto Rican students who were going to one of the local law schools in Puerto Rico to come to New York and finish their education for free to continue to become brand new lawyers in the workforce.
That's awesome.
Seriously,
Absolutely.
It's so great when you hear that other people that had nothing to do with this disaster decide to help. And it means the world to us. You know, we're stuck in so many ways. So when we hear that people are bringing food, or people are collecting money, or, you know, helping move their credits to a different school, it's amazing. And honestly, thank you so much, Stephen. That's such a great thing.
Yeah, I was really glad to hear that the place that I was working at was a place that did want to do something like this, which is a very kind gesture. And I feel that it's a little bit more than just giving money. I feel that it's really showing that sometimes we can go above and beyond to get it going, and just make sure that, you know, people who are already trying to follow their dreams in the world of law, just being able to continue to follow that dream and continue on to their path. So we all know that there was a It film before this brand new one that came out in 2017, but it's not, this 2017 one is not a remake. I want to let that be known, everybody, because the 1990 film was in fact a TV miniseries on ABC, and there's only so much that you can do on network television. Granted, we should always let Tim Curry do what Tim Curry does best. And I think that we can both, I think that all three of us can agree on that. But a little interesting fun fact about this new movie: how many years has it been since the TV miniseries went live?
27.
Yes, just like in the book, every 27 years, and in the movie, every 27 years, Pennywise returns. Lo and behold, he's returned 27 years after his first incarnation in film. So you are absolutely right, Maria. You're absolutely right. They always say that the book is usually better, although to a certain degree it could be debatable. However, after so many book and film comparison battles on this channel's show already, yet to get one victory. So I'm hoping that you will do the very best that you can, especially considering the fact that you are a film critic here. So I'm really thinking that you will put up a good battle. So we have a couple of categories to go through, and we're going to start off with the atmosphere. One of the few things that a lot of people have said about the film is the fact that some of them didn't really find it that scary. But that's because of the fact that a good chunk of them didn't really read the book. And honestly, as someone who has read the book and has seen the film, it's not all about being scary. It's more so about the atmosphere and the development of the characters. But of course, the movie's tweaked it a little bit, because in the book, the book takes place in the 1950s. In the movie, it takes place in the 1980s. So the question that we're going to start with in terms of atmosphere is, with the jump in time, is that considered to be a positive or a negative effect in regards to the transition of book to film? Maria, I guess we'll start with you. Uh-oh. Oh no, already? Maria, are you still there? Uh-oh. Hang on, are you back?
I think she's coming back.
Yeah, this is not something that has not happened before. This is something that is not uncommon.
Yeah.
Hang on, I'm gonna reach out to her on Twitter.
I mean, I guess I could give my piece first.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess we could just start off and
Yeah.
go back to the beginning, so we can go with the 1950s.
So, I mean, I feel that the 50s setting feels a little bit more otherworldly than the 1980s, if you know what I mean.
Yes.
Because it was that far, like, you know, in the past, as opposed to, you know, the 30 years ago that the 80s was. Of more sort of like oldie worldy, like almost sepia toned atmosphere really kind of lent it to the sort of traditional that I think that it is really about, because it's about basic fears. You know, that's why I feel that the 50 setting is a little bit more effective if you want to look at it as a horror story. But I totally get the whole, 80s trend right now and stuff like that, and that's probably one reason why they decided to change it.
Mm-hmm. I understand that. I mean, I guess another one of the things that I could probably add is the fact that maybe it was because of the fact that most of Stephen King's books were written in the 80s. Maybe it was a nice little tribute to his work.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Obviously, it itself was published in the 80s, so.
Yeah, that is absolutely true. Okay, well, unfortunately, Maria just dropped out again. Oh my goodness, I had a feeling that this was probably going to happen, but we're going to have to try and keep everybody entertained for the time being. I really hope that her laptop didn't crash because she was trying to keep it going.
Yeah.
Right. Sorry, everybody, this was completely not in the cards. Hang on, I'm just trying to see if anybody is reaching out to me at the moment. Okay, hang on, she just cut back.
It looks like she just joined.
Yeah, she just joined. Maria, can you hear us? Maria, are you there? That's you, I'm probably guessing, in regards to the rustling.
Yeah, I guess so, yeah.
Okay, no, I just wanted to make sure because I'm hearing other sounds and I'm not sure where they're coming from.
I can see her icon, but I can see her little face on my screen.
I can see her too, but I'm trying to speak to her on Twitter to see if she can hear me. I'm going to try and resend her the link as well.
Yeah.
I mean, it's too late to turn back now. We really can't. We just can't cancel this right now. We got to get this. We got to keep this going.
Yeah, that's fair enough.
I know. I mean, we planned this so far for about a month and a half now.
Yeah.
It's only, I mean, the way that I looked at it to a certain degree was the fact that putting it into the 80s, not just with the Stephen King story behind it, I kind of feel that at the same time, it was another interesting way to put an additional spin on the story itself. I mean, one of the few things that a lot of people in this generation, I mean, the younger generations now, I mean, I'm an 80s child. I grew up in the 1980s, so I know about the pop culture references, and I know about the technology and all of that stuff.
Yeah.
But one of the few things that I felt that was very well was the fact that they tried to rope the technology in to the concept of Pennywise just lurking in the shadows and not necessarily just being a present force in front of your face, but rather just being everywhere. The fact the fact that if you watched it carefully, I think that one of the coolest parts of it was the fact that if you listened carefully, he was sort of on the television all the time, and he was on the news, he was on the kids shows, and he was sort of sending messages to the kids, which was a very cool thing to actually think, and I think it added a little bit to the creep factor.
I totally get that.
Because I don't necessarily know if they saw that much in the book. I mean, I did read the book, and I don't necessarily remember. Maria, are you back?
Yes, so sorry. Super sorry.
Oh, no problem. It's not your fault. I was doing my very best to fill in your shoes just so we didn't get any boring watchers.
I hope it doesn't happen again.
Well, we will keep our fingers crossed. My fingers are crossed. But what I was trying to say was, as a person who was born in the 80s, one of the few things that I thought in regards to having the film start in the 1980s rather than in the 1950s was the fact that the technology that was predominant in the 80s at the time was used to the advantage of Pennywise really trying to get inside the heads of the children, probably more than just the children. Like the television sets where he was actually like in the kids shows on the news. It was kind of interesting.
Yeah, I really do enjoy that switch that they made, because even though I found it interesting in the TV miniseries, I don't know, this whole kids adventure thing, I think we remember a lot of the 80s, that kind of movies, you know, the Goonies, and now we have Stranger Things happening, which is also very similar. So I think it's a way of anchoring us into something familiar, and also the references of the things the kids are doing. We remember maybe a little bit more the music, the movies that they kept showing in the theater where they kept walking by. So we could feel a little bit more like those kids because we remember those references in the pop culture maybe a little bit more.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, and let's get back to where we were already starting, you know, the pop culture references. Don't get me wrong. I mean, if I remember the book correctly, there was a lot of pop culture references from the 1950s, but we also have to remember that when the book came out, it was 20, 30 years since the 1950s. So it was a time for the readers of the book that was a little bit more familiar.
Yeah, that's true. But again, you know, the pop culture that's referenced in the book, referring to the 1950s pop culture, it's all very classic, very base fears, like all of the, you know, in-your-face werewolf films, and obviously the and see a film called I Was a Teenage Werewolf, and I haven't seen that film, but I'm assuming it's a very and I think that's really what the fear in it is all about. It's about childish, basic fears, and the whole idea that kids are scared of very overt things, which is what I think the 50s horror was all about. And I think that's why the 50s kind of feels like, as I was saying before, just before Maria dropped out, I was saying that the 50s feels more like another world because it was so far away as opposed to the 80s. Kind of it being set in another world a little bit, if you know what I mean, if we're looking at it as a horror.
Yeah, I mean, I will agree with you.
Yeah,
I will agree with you when it comes to the 50s. It's sort of like, you know, a simpler time, time that is long forgotten because that was the time that was predominant of the nuclear family. It was when the golden age of television was starting. It was when rock music wasn't so predominant, so there really wasn't something that kids could really lash out against when it came to the older generations. We were in the middle of a real peaceful time before the Vietnam. It was between the World War II and the Vietnam War, so there was I mean, we did have the Korean War, but that really, because of the fact that it was sort of historically based on just trying to stop communism. I mean, granted, the same was with war, but there seemed to be a much bigger, tighter sense of the bonds of family and the bonds after wartime, whereas in the 80s, that was when lots of people were really starting to branch out. I mean, we'll go back to television, you know, in the late 1980s, all the way into the 1990s, you had houses with 4 different televisions, and every person who was watching each television was watching something different.
Yeah.
I
think that actually might work for the story a bit better, because one of the elements of it, small towns are normally very similar no matter where you are. You know everybody, there's a sense of safety, and the kids can run around feeling safe. When you remove that and suddenly there's a curfew at 7 o'clock and kids feel that there's an actual danger to themselves, which you shouldn't feel at that age at any point, I think that's something that no matter what decade, it's going to work. But as you were saying, the fact that there's more TVs in different rooms and kids are off kind of doing their own thing, and the parents are not so involved, because we know in the 80s, the movies have shown us, parents are never around for some reason. So the kids are on their own. And in this movie, I feel like that's what it works at, the isolation of these kids. If they're weeded out, it's easier for him to attack them. And I think that worked a lot better in the movie than in the book. It feels a lot like these kids are separated. They only the Losers Club, which happens later. And so there's more danger for them than maybe thinking of the 50s and that nuclear family and being very safe.
Right, right. I agree with you on that. Let's elaborate a little bit more on the concept of the small town. We seem to see that predominantly in horror-themed books and films. Why is it that the small town works so well? Let's start from Alex with the book perspective first.
I think the small town it works on two levels, I think, because quite claustrophobic. Everybody is penned in one area. So obviously that can kind of feel quite scary. It's almost like, the world outside doesn't really exist. So everything that happens in this small town is essentially the residents' whole life, and that's just exactly what they know. But on another level, knows everyone. So as Maria was saying, there is that element of safety. So the idea that something like terrifying or really bad could happen to the people in that town is something that they just wouldn't conceive of until it actually happens. So I think that's why the small town works closed in, which is kind of scary, and also because the idea that nothing unexpected could happen, because things like that don't in those sorts of places.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Maria, is there anything you want to add in regards to that?
She basically took everything I was going to say and said it
there you go.
in one way. I was going to say it can either be like your bubble as a kid, because your world is basically the town you live in, so it can be a bubble, or like Alex was saying, claustrophobic, it could be a trap. So either you're very happy in it or you can't escape it. You can imagine actually getting out of it, and I don't remember who said this, and I might be quoting it wrong, but somebody once said that if you tell the story of your town, you tell the story of the world. And I think when you tell the story of a small town, everybody can relate. And as an audience, and you can kind of relate to that feeling that you knew everybody, but there was also something maybe not so great about your town, that something maybe was happening. Like, I don't know, as you grow up, you realized the reality of it, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a very, I never actually heard that quote. I actually really like that. I'm going to use that at some point in time.
I need to find out who said it, because I might even be misquoting it, but I remember the wisdom in it, and that's all that matters.
Well, it definitely didn't sound like a misquote. I'll definitely throw that out. And just by the way, everybody, just in case you didn't realize this, there are going to be some spoilers in regards to the book and film, and that means it's kind of impossible to have a show like this without those spoilers, because we kind of need something to talk about here. So just wanted to let everybody know that if you haven't read the book or if you haven't seen the film, first of all, I suggest you do the walk of shame and know that you're missing out on something really good. So let's go back to some of those pop culture references and the uses of technology. Considering the fact that it takes place in two separate time periods, do we feel that when it comes to the pop culture references, that also includes a lot more knowledge? I mean, I think one of the biggest things that I thought was kind of funny was the fact that it took place in the 80s. It gave Eddie a little bit more of a chance to be the type of person that he was and talk about all those health issues. But the question really is, does in the case of a story like It, let's also throw in some book references in regard to that, but we'll start with Maria. Does that help or does that hurt the story in general?
Do you mean that it was set in the 80s?
The fact that it was set in the 80s with all of the additional knowledge that they had.
I think it helps it. As you said, Eddie suddenly has this new wave of medicine information and diseases and stuff, which he's absolutely obsessed with. I also think it works a lot with Richie. Even though his voices or his characters are not as predominant as they are in the book, I think it helps him as well. This very comedy, kind of almost insulting humor that he had. Like I said, I personally enjoyed it more than the 50s. I'm also reading the book. And while I do get a few references from the pop culture, I think I'm missing a lot of them because it's not as close to what I remember, you know? And maybe it might hurt the movie a little bit, but I think if it brings the audience in, which is the real purpose, it's actually helping it.
Mm-hmm. Alex, what do you think?
I agree with the whole point that, yes, it brings the audience in because it's something that they can recognize. But also in terms of the knowledge, you know, if they had a lot of knowledge, then they're be as scared, like they would possibly like think through, you know, the possibilities that aren't quite as... I don't know what I'm trying to say, but you know what I mean? Like, if they're more knowledgeable, then doesn't that make them more mature, possibly?
That's a good point.
That's a very good point, as a matter of fact.
Yeah. I will say, though, no matter how much knowledge I have of anything, if some weird burned creature shows up to me in some dark archives and starts running after me, I'm going to lose my mind and get very scared, no matter what I know about this world.
And speaking of and so that, I guess that could go right into the next topic, and that's the horror elements. Obviously, we were creeped, but obviously because of the fact that they take place in two separate time periods, we do see those fears in different ways. So I guess my question would be, I'm trying to figure out how to actually word the question. Well, how do you feel? I guess the right way to go is, you know, when reading the book or watching the film and you see the horror elements that are within these two separate mediums, how do they pan out in terms of moving the story along, or more in fact, how do they add to the scare factor?
I mean, I would say that the whole... in the book, I think that a lot of the Stephen King tells his stories, and the way that he can create such a descriptive and immersive world, and the way that he describes those horror elements and those horrific scenes, that makes you feel like you're there, as opposed to just kind of throwing it in your face like a film does, if you know what I mean. It really touches me inside, because it just kind of makes me feel like I'm right there and I'm experiencing those horrific things for myself, and I'm obviously using kind of my own interpretations of what that might look like. That's more scary to me than, you know, actually seeing it. So
That's a hard question, because as Alex was saying, and a very big part of the story is your imagination. So the way that you imagine it and the way that you see it could be a lot scarier than what it is. And that's something that plays out through the whole story. I think that while it can be scarier in the book because of your imagination, I think the director took such an interesting approach and decided to scare you, not necessarily in a different way, but didn't like do the same tropes that you're always doing. I feel like every moment that it has an encounter with the kids is memorable to me, and it feels claustrophobic and it feels scary, and such a creative villain. So for example, the whole projector thing, and he's like this huge thing in front of them, and I'm not expecting that, you know? So the way it switches from, you know, the light turning on and off, I think that's incredibly fantastic, and it really actually scared me. And even though I'm sensing his presence, because they kind of build it up, every single moment was very different and memorable and scary in its own way. And I like that creativity that you can add to it in the big screen.
Right. Yeah, you're absolutely right. As a matter of fact, that specific scene, the projector, which obviously is not what happens in the book, that's a very big difference right there. But yeah, I think that was one of the parts of the movie that actually did really scare me. I did, because I think it was because you didn't expect it. And that's one of the few things that I always look at when it comes to a movie. It's like, how do we take this one specific element that we may have seen in the source material, and how do we really make it scary? Because in the made-for-TV movie, they went directly out of the book. And to me, it really wasn't that scary. But it's something that nobody expected. And yeah, I think it was done in very good taste. But to close out the atmosphere question, because we're going into the last question, and that is one of the things that we mentioned earlier was the fact that when it comes to 80s movies, parents don't seem to be pretty much there at all. So in regards to the book, we do see some of the kids actually getting along with their parents, or sometimes they're not getting along with their parents. But one of the things that I would like to ask is, it seems to me sometimes that it's sort of a children versus adults theme. And the question that it is could it possibly be the work of Pennywise? Because he sort of has infected this small town like a disease for the sake of his own benefit. So could it be that this is the case, that he's actually pitting maybe not necessarily the parents versus the kids, but maybe the kids against the kids?
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, I think that maybe it's the whole idea that obviously Pennywise kind of feeds on fear, right? And you know, maybe adult fears are certainly their sort of basic fears aren't quite as strong as obviously kids would have. It's all about kids' belief in the monsters that they see Pennywise take the form of, and I think it's, you know, the strength of that belief that makes him appear more strongly to the kids as opposed to the adults. But yeah, no, I definitely think that's why, you know, he's more interested in kids and why the kids are more interested in him as opposed to the adults. I think it's definitely down to Pennywise, definitely.
I don't know.
Yeah, but don't you think? Oh,
sorry. Go ahead.
I'm sorry.
No, go for it.
One of the things that wouldn't be interesting was, but if he was in fact controlling the parents, why wouldn't he weaponize them?
That's an interesting question. Oh.
like, what's the best way? What's the best way to lure children into the trap? Their parents tell them to do something.
God.
No, I
See, that's what I love so much about this specific story. There's so many weird ideas that have been popping into my head lately, just thinking about it.
Yeah.
It's definitely very layered, and I do like that about it. I don't know if there is a direct link between Pennywise and the adults, because from what I can tell in the movie, they seem sort of like him, like they just cannot see him or understand it. You know, this is something that affects kids for some reason. And as Alex said, it's because, you know, there's a more primal fear when you are a child, you know, certain things get to you way more that you can't rationalize as an adult. So I don't know if it's a direct link, but I do see a sort of forgetfulness and lack of attention from the adults in the story. And I think the fears of each child is a direct relation to the way they have grown up, you know, the way their parents have treated them. So Eddie and his overbearing mother, and Bill and his parents were sort of absent since Georgie's death. So the fears that they have are very related to the parents, but I don't necessarily think it's Pennywise making the parents do those things. I just think it's him taking advantage of that sort of lack of attention from the adults.
That's a very good point.
Yeah.
I never thought of it that way.
Yeah. I do also think that it's about, you know, it's about the strength of the belief that the kids have in these monsters, more prominent to them. Childhood, the things that kids believe in is, you know, can be very, very powerful, I think.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Okay, well, that wraps up the first round. And and it was close. I think that we all brought up some very good points. I was actually really happy that you got. I was really impressed with the answer with the last one. It was sort of a little bit of a curveball, but I really wanted to hear your takes on it. But from what I could tell, based on the math that I've been doing, the film wins in terms of atmosphere of a score of 3-2. And the reason why I feel that way is exactly why, because of the fact that we feel that the 50s has been such a long ways away. And we have a whole new generation of people finally getting exposed to this film because they obviously haven't picked up the book. Most of the people don't pick up the book first. But because of the fact there's a lot of people that are going to see this movie right now, they would feel a lot more relatable towards the 80s. Because I think one of my personal examples, because my job is to be a mediator, but in between rounds I can give in my 2 cents here. And I believe that when you see that Bill's bike is named Silver, nobody who has been born after 1990 has any idea what that reference is. That's the Lone Ranger. And I guarantee you that next to no one went to see that movie starring Johnny Depp because it was terrible. So,
you know how I actually know that line, and it's a little bit embarrassing, from Bruce Almighty.
oh,
Jim Carrey says it.
Yeah.
There you
Yeah.
go. Yeah, isn't it weird where certain pop culture references actually show up these days? Like they're reused in the most awkward of ways and nobody would know.
Yep, pretty much.
Yeah, anyway, okay, so one of the few things is I've been seeing a lot of great comments floating around in the comments. A lot of people are talking about classic horror films, which is great. I'm absolutely loving that. But one of the few things that we're going to do before we get into the second one is I'm going to have to give Alex a little bit of a curve here. And that's merely because of the fact that the film, is based on only a portion of this gigantic story. So it's so hard to try and reference things when she has a whole half of this book that needs to be talked about, and we won't be able to do that until 2019. Unfortunately.
Yeah.
That's a little bit of a heads up,
suck.
everybody. That's a little bit of a heads up, everybody. The winner is not going to be determined today. We have another half. We have half of. We still have one other half to discuss. So I'm hoping that these two ladies will be back in 2 years when we talk about the second chapter.
No problem.
So let's talk about that, because this is a real make or break point for this story in general. The fact that it is going to be split into 2 movies. Now, this whole trend began with Harry Potter. It was impossible for the Deathly Hallows to be split, to be one single movie, because how many people these days can sit in a movie theater for almost 6 hours? It's impossible. I could do it. I'm sure that I can, but I know that most people can't. So unfortunately, it was the biggest blessing and the biggest curse, because after that, we saw Twilight Breaking Dawn get split into 2, and then it all went horribly wrong.
Yes.
But the fact that they're doing this with it may be this concept's saving grace. So the first question that I would want to ask from you both on a level, let's start with the book first, because Alex has read the whole story. Is splitting the story a good thing for cinema?
For cinema, yes, because of the reasons that you said. You know, people's attention spans are not that long. But I think the connection between the timelines in the book is so strong that there is a very strong argument to not split it and at least have part of the story from each timeline side by side, because the connections between them are just so strong, and the parallels within the characters as well. You can see them more clearly, I think, if you get side by side as opposed to 2 years later. You know, unless you've literally just watched the first part before you go into the second part, I don't think you'd get those similarities between the characters, even though all of those years have passed. So I think in terms of retention and audience enjoyment, yes, it's a good thing that they split it. The actual story, and you just get so much more from seeing the stories, you know, at the same time. I'm not sure it was such a good thing to split it as much as they have done in terms of this is the kids and this is the adults. Yeah, that's what I think.
Okay, that's excellent. Maria, what do you think?
Well, I think the book, what really kind of like drew me in is you first get that scene from Georgie, which pretty much everybody knows, and then we're thrown 27 years later. And these characters that I don't know very well all have something in common, and the mention of this thing or saying it came back, scary. And I don't know anything as a reader. There's obviously a fear in them that they need to go back or they need to sort something out, but I don't know what's going on. So in that sense, I think it's really interesting that there's a present and then there are the flashbacks of when they're kids. However, after a while, I think it's too much. I think Stephen King did it too often, going back and forth, and I'm immersed now in the kids, but then suddenly there's a huge part about the grown-ups, and I just would like to stick to something. And I think for the movies, it's much better to divide it clearly and very clean cut, because you can enjoy both stories and understand that in 2 years, well, this many amount of years in Derry has passed and they're grown-ups and something else is happening. I much prefer that. I'm glad they did that rather than have a maybe 3 an hour and a half movie of the entire book. I don't think it would have been enough.
Yeah, probably would have had to be longer if you want my personal opinion.
I mean, I would have made it longer as well, but like you said, who's going to stay six hours in the cinema? No one's going to do it. So then you get some sort of watered down version of something that's actually really great.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Yeah, I have to. I can't disagree. I can't agree with you more on that. But at the same time, here's where I'm going to throw a curveball your way, and this is where Alex is going to run with this. The fact that we are going to wait another 2 years for the second chapter to be told, the fact that we haven't even seen the adults at all in the first movie. I mean, I personally feel that the best way that this film could have ended was at least see Stan's death at the very end of this film, because we get it at the very beginning of the book.
Yeah.
So not only does that add a little bit of a cliffhanger, but does it at least start to rope the fans in to start feeling like, oh my goodness, it's happening again to them as adults? Like, we start to get a little bit of a feeling towards them. So as someone who's read the whole story, if you didn't even see the adults at all, would you have that exact same attachment to these kids 2 years later as adults rather than even seeing them as kids again?
Well, I thought about this a lot, and sorry, we're doing all the spoilers, but in case you don't know, the movie ends with the pact. You know, they do the promise, they go their separate ways, and that's kind of where it ends. And it ends in a really sweet note with Bill. I would have loved that scene with Stanley or is taking a bath or whatever. But then I keep thinking about it, and I think their cliffhanger is that it ends with the title, and it says, Chapter 1. And if you don't know anything about the story, you're suddenly thinking, what do you mean Chapter 1? Like, what's going on? Is something else going to happen? Does it actually come back? So instead of trying to cast somebody that maybe they were not going to be around later, or, you know, get this whole other story figured out, I kind of like that it's like, oh, the end, but is it really? Like, you don't know, except we do know, of course, there's another part. But I do enjoy that it ends their childhood, and then we have something else to look forward to completely.
Mm-hmm. Alex, what do you think as someone who knows the rest of the story?
Yeah, no, I do agree with you that I think they should have had a little taster of what's to come, as opposed to just having the fact that this is the first part of, you know. And also, I think that I'm guessing that this probably was intentional, but within the book, you get it's like a coming of age story, if you know what I mean, because you see them like literally grow up and you see how they're the same, how they have changed. So I think you obviously lost that by having the two parts completely separate with 2 years between them, because I don't think people would remember all of those little similarities in the kids when they see the adults in the second part. So I think you would have lost the whole, you know, passage between child thing, unless they, you know, somehow do that really, really well. And there are nods to the first part in the second part. We won't know, obviously, until that comes out. Yeah.
Right. I just want to make sure that you finish saying stuff because you were breaking up a little bit. So I just want to make sure you're finished with your case.
Yeah.
Everything good? Okay, good. No, I will definitely agree there as well. Now, let's ask another interesting question in regards to the story, considering the fact that it's going to be split. There's a little bit of something in the rumor mill going around that after the second film is done, they are planning to make a special edition home video release on Blu-ray, and obviously it'll most likely be on streaming services as well, where they're going to take both of the films and interweave them in the order of the story in the book. So basically, you will get officially the complete story as one. However, do you feel that it is better to keep them separate, one by one? Advantageous thing.
I think going back to what I said, I mean, if they interweave them together, I think you would get of them, you know, being affected by all of the things that have happened to them in the years between. I think it would be a pretty good thing for them to interweave it, because it would be more like the book then. You know, you'd get that whole sense of them, you know, as they grow up, how they change. A good thing to interweave it.
Maria, what do you think?
I think it's nice to have the option. You know, I like the idea, as I said, of keeping them separate, but if you could also have a third kind of viewing of this story, that it's not the way it was in theaters, I think it would be a really cool idea. And I do think in the same line of what Alex was saying, I think the grown-up story is fueled by the memories of childhood. So maybe, and maybe I'm shooting myself in the foot, maybe the adult story is not as good on its own completely, you know? I think the fact that it's interweaved, sorry.
Interwoven, I think that's how it goes.
Okay, I speak Spanish. I'm very sorry if I'm messing this up.
I'm not an English teacher, so I can't tell you if you're right or wrong.
All right. So I think, yeah, mixing them together, it's a really good idea. But I also like the fact that it's your choice. You know, you could either watch the two separate or watch this whole thing together. I like that.
Yeah, because do you think that it works? Yeah. Do you think maybe the interweaving actually makes more sense to do it in the film? Or does the imagination factor in regards to the book make it feel a little bit better, or does it make it a little bit more confusing when you're constantly phasing in and out of time periods?
I think it works better for the book to go back and forth, because there's this element of mystery of it, and you do get like little glimpses of stories that have nothing to do with the main characters of Pennywise, you know, in the book, which I like. You know, it gives you the sense of Derry and this menace instead of just the kids. But I think that's something that works a lot more in the book, because if he would just flat out make it in one go chronologically, it might not be as interesting. I don't know, maybe. But I think visually, and it sitting in a theater, having a part 1 and part 2 is a lot better.
Right, right. Alex, what do you think? I just jump in when someone's done. There's no reason for me to constantly ask someone to just start talking.
Yeah, no, I agree with Maria. I agree with Maria that I think, yes, it does work better to have them side by side in the book, because, you know, as you said, it does add to the mystery, you know. And I mean, I didn't get confused, you know, when they had like a huge chunk from the 1950s and then a huge chunk from the 1980s. But I totally understand that perhaps wouldn't translate as well to screen as I think it does in the book. You know, I think if we're talking about and certainly the whole, it's much easier to get the whole coming of age element, having them side by side, I think, because, you know, having them one by one, you forget things. Of course you forget things, and certainly within 2 years people would. So
yeah, I don't think necessarily it's confusing in the book. There's just parts where I'm really invested in one part of the story. So for example, right now I am I don't remember what's the last thing that's happened in the childhood, but everybody has seen Pennywise in some way. And so I'm really involved in this part of the story. And then all of a sudden I have to go to Bill going to some restaurant because he's going to meet Mike and everybody else. And I just don't want to read that right now. I want to keep reading the part of the kids. So in that sense, I feel like, oh man, like I don't enjoy this back and forth so much. But
Yeah,
I do understand that if we don't have those sort of flashbacks of the kids, then the adult story is not as good. It doesn't make that much sense.
okay.
Okay, so another question that I would ask is, one of the most crucial parts of the book is not included in the movie at all, and it's pretty much the one thing that basically creates the Losers Club, and it's the fact that they were working on building a dam. The dam is not even in the movie at all. So
Yeah.
the question really is, with that completely not included, does that take away from the story? And with what was done to replace it, was it a wise decision to do? Maybe it was because of the fact that it took place in the 1980s, so kids aren't really interested in building dams at this point in time. They'd rather go hang out at the arcade like Richie did. Or would it have been an advantageous tool in the film to try and create and strengthen the bonds of the friendship between these kids?
Yeah, I mean, I think what the dam does in the book is it's the start of really their friendship. It's a project that they all work on together, and having that kind of team building activity really makes you believe in their friendship and believes in the tightness of their bond. So, I mean, I get that obviously, yes, probably in the 1980s, kids would not have been building dams. But I think they probably could have done something more obviously relevant to the 80s, but they could have done something like that just to make you believe in, their friendship, I think. So, yeah.
I'm very partial to the dam story. As I was reading it, I thought it was just charming and adorable, and having Ben come to his own and just know how to build it. Ben is my favorite character. So all that, I thought it was really great. The only thing I feel in that sense is that it was, and remind me if I'm wrong, it was Bill, Eddie, and Ben, I think. So not everybody's involved. And Richie kind of comes somewhere in the end, I think. And that was great. But I do like that in the movie, it's about Bill trying to understand what happened to Georgie. And that's something that's very important, the fact that he carries this pain and he wants to try and figure out what happened, and his friends are sort of helping, and then Ben shows up because he was hurt. I like, and I think it's an important thing about these characters, that they bond through the trauma that they've had in their lives, whether it's being bullied or losing a brother or, being overwhelmed by all of the diseases that are in the world. They kind of bond through all of those things, and then Beverly becomes part of it. And I kind of like that flow of their story in the movie. Not to say that I don't like it in the book. It's just different. And I think it was a good approach to maintain the story focused on, hey, Georgie died and his arm got bitten off by something. We just don't forget that. And trying to continue and find that, I think it was really important to show it.
Yeah, no, I totally get that. I mean, I hadn't thought that, yes, the thing that bonds them in the film is trauma, but yeah, that's very true. It's something very physical that they've managed to do together, and they've had this big achievement, what they think is a big achievement of building the dam. So I think it's just a case of the time periods being totally different.
That's a good point.
And I haven't finished the book yet, but I like that Bill is trying to study the sewers and the map of it, and I don't know, and he tries to show his dad, and his dad shuts it down. Does he start doing that at all in the book at some point?
Yeah, he does.
Okay.
You don't really see a lot of interactions between the kids and their parents in the book, to be honest. It's something that, but it's not. This is a scene with Bill and his dad talking about the sewers and stuff. So, yeah.
Yeah, if correct me if I'm wrong, but it was pretty much to a certain degree whenever, like, Bill's father just didn't want to really focus on Georgie. They just basically said, listen, he's gone. We just have to move on and just live on life. So it's
Right.
to a certain extent, it was done that way.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's right.
Now, if the dam was in fact in the book, in the film, would it have been something that people would have appreciated? I guess that's another important question. Like, probably one person would say, why are they building a dam? Don't they have better things to do?
Well, possibly in the 1980s they would have done. So, yeah. Again, I think that's possibly a product of them being 50s kids in the book. You know, that's, I'm guessing, what kids got up to during the 1950s. So,
You know, I'm not entirely sure. I think what happened was they exchanged the dam story with the whole scene of them jumping into this lake. And the whole feeling of having fun and feeling safe, it's that scene, you know, when Beverly joins them and they're having fun, and then we get that sort of glimpse of the turtle, which means something, but we don't know from the movie. And I think that was switched. I don't think it would have hurt the movie at all, because as a kid, I remember doing silly stuff in the backyard. Like, we used to have hammers and try to dig up quartz from there's a mountain behind my house. And you would have considered that ridiculous, but we had a blast, you know? We thought we were scavengers and we were spelunking or whatever. So I think anybody would have understood that kids just do projects and have fun, and it doesn't matter what it is.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, we finished the round, and I gotta say that, Maria, you made a good point, and that's why, honestly, I think the book takes it better in this case. I think that the book is good in regards to the story, because I just feel that the dam is, to me, something that brings them closer together, and I think it's because of the fact that there are some elements in the film that do work very well. There's that point in time where they actually split, and honestly, to me, I was a little upset that happened, because that was like, it's not something that I wanted this. It was like, you didn't want that. You wanted them to keep growing and growing and growing, and that's what the dam does. It's you're building. They were physically building a friendship.
Yes.
Through the dam. That's the way I looked at it. So that's where we're going. So we're tied up right now. That is pretty awesome. That means that we've got a nice little battle going here. We got a couple of questions in regards to the next film, and I guess I'll just let everybody know at the moment they have not done any filming. All I do know is that Andy Muschietti will be directing. They are in the middle of casting the film. I'm just hoping that they do this right. But anyway, let's get into those characters.
Oh, yes.
And I think we have a lot. I think that this is where we're going to have a real great deal to talk about. We're hitting the 1 hour mark, by the way. It's almost 3 o'clock. We're making good time, which is great. But let's start without any hesitation and talk about those characters. Let's take a look at the interpretations of these characters in the book and in the film. Let's talk about the formation of the Losers Club. It's very different than in the book than it is in the film.
Yeah, it is. Because, I mean, in the books, only Bill and Eddie are already friends in the book. And I think Richie comes across them very early on, and then finds them after he's been chased by the bullies, and that's how, you know, the core of the Losers Club comes together. They kind of they didn't really know each other all that well, did they?
No, they didn't.
Sort of, yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's how, you know, they come together in the book.
Yeah, don't worry about it. We'll continue. We're gonna continue with that. I mean, like, I just remember specifically in the movie that 4 of them were already friends.
Yeah, it seemed like that was already established.
Yeah, I mean, whereas in the book, you know, you see them all, you know, individually, and then you see how they come into play and how they come into their specific roles, I guess, within the Losers Club. Whereas I don't feel you really got that as strongly in the film.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah, it does feel a little bit like there was already a core group of friends, and then there were 3 more additions, which I didn't hate, but yeah, it doesn't feel like the formation of a club per se. I don't know. I still like the way it was formed. Like, you needed certain people for it to feel complete. I like the way Beverly got involved. And this happens also in the book beforehand, that Beverly and Ben kind of knew each other. They had a bit of an interaction before they met in the Losers Club, and I like that they maintained that.
Yeah.
And I kind of like what each of them add as the movie goes along, so to speak.
Okay, so now the leader of the Losers Club is Bill, and
Yes.
The questions in regards to him is his relationship with the Losers Club is definitely very different as in the film as it is in the book. And also, they seem to elaborate a little bit more in regards to his crush on Beverly. Now, I personally don't recall much of that crush predominant in the book as a child. I think I saw it a little more so when he was an adult. But we have to focus on the children at this point in time. So, Alex, in regards to Bill, how do you feel about his representation in the book?
I mean, he's definitely the leader, and they all sort of look to him to see, you know, what they're going to do next and stuff like that. And yeah, his crush on Beverly is not as prominent in the 1950s timeline. It's quite obvious that they are all romantically interested in her, but it doesn't feel like. And I also think that might be because they are, well, I know in the book that they are supposed to be 11 years old, whereas I think in the film they're like 13-ish.
Yeah.
I think that, you know, those 2 years are possibly quite different in terms of you feel about the opposite sex romantically.
Very sure.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I mean, Bill is obviously the leader of the Losers Club in both the book and the film, and you can tell that all of the others do look up to him, and they do look to him to see, you know, what the best thing to do is, and they look to him for some kind of leadership. Very, very prominently in the kids' timeline in the book, and also in the adults as well. It's really, really interesting how they do, you know, slot back into their roles. But I know I'm not supposed to talk about the adult storyline, so I'm trying not to talk about that. So
I know it's tough. It's very tough. You know so much. You know so much right now that we really can't disclose, but we will. We will eventually.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think I have. I'm doomed to fail in this category because, I mean, the book is always going to do the characters better. There's so much more insight. There's so much more story. You can read what they're thinking. So it's hard to compare that. I think they did an excellent job showing that Bill was their leader. But again, it's the whole feeling that it's already established. Bill is the one leading them to the sewers. Bill is the one with the adventures and trying to find his brother or what happened to his brother. So it's really hard to have that same feeling of everybody just accepts that he's the leader because of something just good in him. You know, you don't kind of get that in the movie. I just realized I'm not defending the movie right now at all, so I'm really sorry about that.
It happens. It happens.
But in terms of the actor and the way it was performed, I really did enjoy it because there is an innocence about him and a positivity and something hopeful that maybe the other kids don't have. And you need that in a leader. You need it that when things are tough, he's willing to, you know, go forward and go into the scary house or go try find what's going on when everybody maybe might not feel as courageous. And I think that actor did a great job as Bill.
Let me ask another question, because one of the few things that we could possibly interpret here, the relationship that he sort of wants to have with Beverly that just seemed more prominent in the movie. Do you think that it's possibly because of the fact that he's not necessarily looking for love, but rather he's looking for companionship because he lost his brother?
That didn't occur to me at all. I think it's very common for kids to have crushes, and more common when suddenly there's the one girl in your group, you know, like, oh my God, there's a girl. And I think that's very common, and it didn't occur to me. Because in terms of companionship, I think he probably got that more with his friends, you know? I think he had a solid group of friends that he would have felt could help him through any of that. I think it was just a legitimate crush, but I felt it more from her than from him. I felt like he was more just nervous around a girl, and she was more interested in him.
Yeah.
What did you guys think about? What did you think about? Let's take a look at both sides. Even though it's very, very brief, it still speaks volumes. His relationship with Georgie.
Oh. Yeah. It's very difficult to talk about because obviously that's a lot of his drive.
Yeah.
You know, defeat the monster that's terrorizing them. So the love for his brother is just so strong, and that's what is in the forefront of his mind the whole time. The book, and I think you get it in the film too. So
yeah, I don't know how specific, I mean, I'm sure very specific they get in the book, but I haven't gone far enough as in the movie. I feel like he's more driven by guilt, and that's sort of where Pennywise gets him, you know, sort of even when they get separated in the sewers and everything, it's because he's so blindly trying to figure out what happened with Georgie and how responsible he is or not. And I do like that. I get the motivation behind it. I get the pain that it's not just that my brother died, but maybe if I hadn't made this boat and maybe if I hadn't sent him off, he wouldn't have died, you know? And I like the way they did that in the movie. It makes more sense. And it makes more sense that that would be his weakness if Pennywise were to ever get him.
Yeah. I think in the book, I mean, you can definitely sense that he does have a sense of guilt. But I do think that in the book, he's a little bit more driven by revenge.
Okay. Got it.
That's what I get. But you can definitely tell that he feels bad, and he believes that it's at least partly his fault that Georgie's dead.
Okay, so let's move on to Beverly. I think one of the interesting things that was one of the few things that I think we all were curious to see in the movie, at least, was her relationship with her father.
I'm really glad they did that well enough without being crazy explicit. Like, you know what's going on, right? It didn't just fly by anybody. We all know. Yeah.
I mean, again, there wasn't really any sort of explicit scenes of sexual abuse in the book, but it's all implied, and you know exactly what's gone on between her and her father. I don't know if this is going back to the fact that they changed the time period of the film, the way that kids, specifically girls, were brought up as opposed to the 1980s. You know, you can kind of sense, you know, differences. And with regards to the relationship between her and her father, it's all implied, and you can tell that he is what terrifies her. Yeah, you can definitely see it.
Yeah, I mean, one of the few things that I am always curious about is when you see something like this, because, listen, unfortunately, we live in a world filled with trigger warnings and problematic issues, and we're not going to go any further than that in regards to this topic, but, you know, it's always important to get the message across with very good taste. I mean, I remember when I read The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, and I read that rape scene, and I was like, is this going to be in the movie? And lo and behold, there it is. Holy cow, for all the world to see. So my question really was going to be, were they going to keep it, you know, as if you may not see it, but you know it's happening? Like, were we going to see that in this movie as well? And you're absolutely right. They did it, I think, in the best way that they possibly could.
Yeah. And it's not just so much what these two people say to each other, because the minute he says, "Are you still my little girl?" we know what's happening. There's just something so uncomfortable about where Beverly lives. And it's not the fact that she's poor. It's just, it feels like it's taking like the breath out of you. It just feels suffocating. And she comes home and she doesn't want to make any noise, you know, and she goes to her room. It's all very like you don't want to be there at all. And I like that it's expressed not only through their conversations, but the way she reacts to her surroundings.
Now, another very interesting thing is in regards to Stan and Mike, because Mike obviously is a little black boy and Stan is a little Jewish boy in what I like to always refer to as Bumblefuck USA. So the question
what exactly is that? Where is that in the map?
It's basically the terminology used for the place that's basically in the middle of nowhere, or the or the boonies, or whatever you want to refer to it as. But there's definitely a predominant factor in regards to people who are not like everybody else in the community. Now, for me, it's interesting to see it take place in a setting in the 1980s where people are a little bit more aware of the fact that not everybody is white or Christian. So I'm just curious if you feel that it was the book where it made, or do you feel like, well, obviously talk about it in the book, but does it feel out of place in the movie, specifically in the time period?
In the movie, I don't get in the movie that Stan is so much marginalized because he's a Jew, I hear there's some few comments between the friends, but I don't get it so much from other people or the bullies. And with Mike, I get where they were going, but whenever he faced the bully and the bully said, like, there's no place for you in this town or whatever, it wasn't very clear why, and as far as I know in the book, it's very clear. And because of the time period, I think the important thing, and it is shown in the movie, is that each kid has a reason why they are isolated or marginalized, whether it's their culture or the color of their skin or their stutter or the fact that they're called, a slut in school. They're all reasons why they don't feel safe or comfortable around other kids. And I think that works, it works in bringing them together. But in terms of Mike, and not necessarily this aspect that he was Black and maybe they didn't accept him like they did in the book in the 50s, I just feel like they maybe left him too much for the end, and that's something that I don't agree with in the movie. There was a moment where I was like, oh yeah, Mike's not here yet, and so much had already happened, and Mike was not part of the group still.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, obviously, because of the time period, the whole fact that Stan is the Jew and the whole fact that Mike is Black
Alex,
is the reason.
You're breaking up a little bit. We couldn't hear you. You might have to start that over.
I was just saying that in the book, the whole fact that Stan is a Jew and the whole fact that Mike is Black are the reasons why they are a part of, and that's to do with people's attitudes towards people who weren't white or people who weren't necessarily Christian. And I think, the book is very much of its time, and that's very authentic to people's attitudes of that time period. So you can definitely tell that that's why they feel different in their small town in Maine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean,
there's much more of an issue in the book.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I still feel that, like, because of the fact that even though it is in the 1980s, it's still in a very secluded area of Maine, because like when you think of where there's a lot more diversity, it's usually closer to the big cities of the country, like in New York, Los Angeles, Houston, Texas, Detroit, Michigan.
Yeah.
So I guess it's, to a certain extent, it still kind of works, but
yeah,
I don't know. I would probably agree with thinking it's just a little bit dated. Not necessarily, but to a certain degree, yes. Now, what about Ben's character? The fact that he took on more of Mike's traits. The question is, does that add in a positive way to the story and to Ben's character, or does it take away a lot from Mike's character?
Well, I already said it. Ben is my favorite character in the book and in the movie. I think he's just adorable in the movie, and he's dorky, but there's like a sense of like confidence in him that I really enjoy when he finds his friends. And the fact that he has this knowledge, or that he's bringing the knowledge, because supposedly he's new in town in the movie, and that's why he's researching all the stuff. Makes a little more sense than someone who has lived there their entire lives and suddenly is researching stuff. That might have been a bit weird. So I do like that they give that to Ben. Because the reason I'm not worried about Mike, and maybe that's because I know the stories, because I know Mike plays a big role in the grown-up part. And even when he does become part of the Losers Club in the movie, he had a few very interesting scenes, you know, with the bullies, and he became like a really important part of it. Maybe not as important as he was in the book. I don't know. I haven't gotten that far.
I think, you know, the fact that in the book is the one that knows how to build things. You know, he, you know, that's his kind of to the Losers Club, I guess. You know, it's his idea to do the dam, which is obviously completely absent from the film. You know, he's the one that's all about physical things, but building their friendships. And I did miss a little bit of that, I think, from the film. You know, what you're saying, yes, you know, he was new to this town, and yes, that's why he was researching it and all of that. He's not new to the town. So,
yeah.
I guess that's just, you know, something that they decided to change for whatever reason. I'm not sure why they decided to change it, but.
What about the little extra something that was thrown in the film, the love letter?
Yeah. It was really cute, wasn't it?
Well, that's also in the book, isn't it? He gives her a postcard with a poem.
He wrote her a little poem, yeah, and she doesn't know who wrote it, but she kind of does know, and that's really cute. Yeah.
I love the whole thing. Sorry, go ahead.
It just adds to his adorable factor.
He's just so adorable, and I love the whole crush with Beverly, and that there's no competition because they're not competing, but there's a little bit of like, we both like Beverly, and I love when Bill is stuttering trying to say that her hair is pretty, and Ben is like, your hair looks really pretty, Beverly. He's like, yeah, man, I did it. I love that.
Yeah, it's like he beat the leader. That's his little victory.
Yeah. Okay, let's talk about my favorite character. Let's talk about Eddie.
Oh, yes.
I gotta tell you, Jack Dylan Grazer is now, forget about Finn Wolfhard continuing with Stranger Things. Jack Dylan Grazer, who played Eddie, is now on CBS in a sitcom called Me, Myself, and I. What a personality this kid has. I personally loved Eddie in the movie, more so than I did. I did love him in the book, because I've always reminded, because I'll tell you why. It's because it reminds me a little bit of my mother being a very big worrying about her kids, and always saying like, oh, don't do that because you're going to get, like, don't touch that because you're going to get an infection or something like that. Like, she was always worrying about the kids, and I always felt that it added a little bit of a weakness to me because of the fact that I was constantly being, you know, watched over by my mother. But to a certain extent, you know, it's,
I think, you know, because they changed Eddie's mother's character quite a lot in the film, didn't they?
Yeah,
I think I didn't really imagine her like that. I always imagined her exactly as you described. You know, she was very busy. She was very on the ball with what Eddie was doing, where he was all the time. Else like that in the film, I don't feel so.
Do you feel that because of the fact that they changed it, was that a good thing or necessarily a bad thing?
Her sense of character is just a lot stronger in the book. I really do, because she wasn't really shown that much in the film. I mean, she was shown more than a lot of the other parents, but I would have liked to have seen more of her, I think.
Maria, what do you think?
I don't I get that she was different, but the minute I saw her, I totally understood that he was living in this sort of like sickly and like lazy environment, and the whole like come and give me a kiss, you know, it's still a way of showing, you know, that she's steering the ship and she's like overbearing over Eddie and everything. I think Eddie had one of the best developments as a character in the movie, you know, the fact that the whole placebo thing happens and he realizes it. And that's one of my favorite things about Eddie, that Eddie has sort of like an inner quiet strength that he doesn't realize it because he has that voice in his head all the time telling him he can't do things. And I like it that maybe the mother's not there, but he has the alarm all the time telling him to take his medicines, and it's just a big thing for him all the time. And that kind of changes near the end, and he confronts his mother. And I think more than every other character, well, maybe not Beverly, but more than the other boys, I like the change in Eddie and the way it was shown.
If that was a cat that I heard in the background, I think the cat agrees.
It's not. It's my parrot mimicking the cat. So thank you very much.
That is so cool.
Yeah.
That is fantastic. Okay, so the final thing, and this is where I think we're going to get even more interesting. Let's talk about Richie.
Oh, Richie.
Yeah, because I don't even want to speak about this part. I want you two to just run with this one. Let's start with Richie in the books.
I mean, he's the clown, isn't he? I mean, I say clown, you know, what are you talking about? A class clown as opposed to a scary murderous clown. But yeah, I mean, obviously he brings a lot of the humor. Really enjoy him more so as a kid, because I just think that he, you know, he kind of G's them all up with his funny voices and all of that kind of stuff, and he just kind of seems to be almost like sunshine in makes them laugh when they need to laugh, and he's just, I think he's the happiness in the book. I do have, you know, issues with the way that they chose to portray him in the film, but I know you're going to talk about that. So,
you mean in the completely different way that they decided to show him in the movie?
Yeah,
I do.
Yeah,
I love Richie in the movie. Honestly, I do, but it is very different from the book. He's more of a dick in the movie, and he's still very funny, and to us specifically, because he kind of takes you out of the tension. But he's a lot more mean to them. But I think that kind of works in the story because you do need a bit of a confrontation between friends, which is also very classic. You know, some of the best friends fighting and having to make up and whatever. And I like that he's sort of the voice of reason. It's like, why would we go after a clown? This is ridiculous. We don't want to die. I don't want to die, so let's not do this. So there is a moment in the movie where you need a bit of a break, where they kind of break up and you have to reunite them. And I think that works storytelling in a movie more than in a book. So I like the jokes. I think he's there more for us as an audience than maybe as humor for the kids. But I really do like it. I like that he doesn't nail the voices either, which he doesn't as a kid. Like, they mention that a lot. It's like, oh, the voice of the cowboy is more like, you know, Eddie trying to be a cowboy, but it doesn't work or something like that. So I do like that they don't make him great at that yet. But I liked him. I think he brings a bit of a confrontation that needs to happen between friends, because friends fight and friends punch each other. I mean, not always, but sometimes it happens, and then you don't want to talk to each other again, and then you make up. And I think that was important to show that even though we are friends, we could have our ups and downs, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was curious about how we were going to take that whole thing, the fact that he came off as somewhat of a divider in the story rather than someone who was alongside with the unity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's it, guys. And it was, again, surprisingly enough, very close. Very, very close.
I'm not believing you when you say that.
4-3 in favor of the book.
There you go.
But we were close.
Okay.
Okay, so now it's time to discuss another specific character who still had yet to be talked about, and Should we start?
Oh, that is so cute.
I really need that
Yes,
part.
he has been very, very patient. Let's talk about Pennywise.
Yeah.
Because this I'm excited for, because this character is such a envelopment of an imagination going completely off the rails.
Oh, yes.
And I was very curious to see how they were going to do this in this new movie, especially since it was going to be rated R. So let's first take a look at the overall description of this character. Let's start with the book.
Okay, well, it's obviously described as wearing a silver suit with large orange buttons, and he has orange hair and feels really serious. And he's not there all of the time, but he kind of is there all of the time in the book. He's like this constant, overwhelming sense of doom, and I feel that he is literally just, and everybody that is in, just, he's not like a kind of, he's always there, but he's not always overtly there, and that's why that he is in the book, because he's not always there. Yeah, that's how I feel about being his presence in the book.
Okay, so let's talk about him actually being physically seen in the movie based on the descriptions that we had seen in the book.
I mean, I really loved it. I thought it was excellent. I could go on and on about how they designed this character. I think there is an anticipation, if you have read the book, to see him. I think they really delivered. I love the entire wardrobe, because it feels, instead of like a murdering clown, which could be like a guy dressed as a clown, Pennywise feels like an entity, like this thing stuck in time in this town, because his outfit is like old and looks like kind of Victorian, and he has that collar and all the stuff. So I feel like he is this presence, this thing that is stuck in this town, and not just a guy dressed as a clown trying to murder children.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean that's what he is. He's not really like a physical entity. He's not someone dressed as a clown, as she said. He is part of the town, and he has been for years and years.
Yeah.
Right. What did you think of the special effects, particularly the eyes, based on how they described them in the book?
I love the eyes. I thought that was great, because they change colors. I don't know if they change colors in the book. I think they kind of shine or glow in the dark. I don't know if they're silver or something, but in the movie he has them yellow. Sometimes they're red, sometimes they're silver. And I'm not entirely sure the meaning of the different colors, but I love it. It's terrifying. And Bill Skarsgård, the way he stares at people, and he does this thing with his eye, which is kind of like to the side sometimes. It's not always like looking at you. It just made him even like creepier and crazier looking.
Yeah, I mean, like, do you feel that when it comes to the imagination, do you think that when you actually see him, do you feel a little bit more? I'm actually gearing this one towards Alex. I really want her honest thoughts. There's one thing about letting your imagination run wild, but when you physically see it, like, does it increase your sense of fear, or does it make you not so scared because now you actually see him and see exactly what he looks like?
Yeah, I would say that, I'm not so scared of him in the film, especially as, he was kind of like funny in some scenes.
Yeah.
And like there were no points at all in the book where I laughed at Pennywise, but there were several scenes in the film where I did. And again, I think that takes away some of the horror element of Pennywise. But I do totally agree that he's definitely all the time, and the fact that he this vendetta against like that, you definitely get that sense in both the book and the film, but him in the film, definitely.
I mean, the one thing that was pretty much missing from him was the big white dirty van with the word candy spelled with a K and the backwards N on it. That was the one thing that was missing from him. But no, I personally I gotta tell you the truth. I got a little bit of goosebumps when I actually saw him in the film. I think that when he introduced himself to Georgie, and when he says, "I'm Pennywise the Dancing Clown," like he shook a little bit. And like his pupils like vanished for a quick second.
Yeah.
I was like, whoa, that's terrible. I was like, that was terrifying. That was terrifying. Okay, but now let's talk about Bill Skarsgård, who was chosen to play him, because originally he was going to be played by Will Poulter. And,
I did not know that.
Yeah, he was originally going to be Will Poulter, and Will Poulter this summer was in a movie called Detroit, and he was terrifying in that movie. Oh my goodness. I hope that he gets nominated for an Oscar because he played this horrible, dirty, racist cop. He was terrifying. I swear to God, if you put him in the Pennywise clown makeup, he would have slayed it. I really do. However, we had seen Pennywise done by Tim Curry, but now we get this brand new actor work of Bill Skarsgård. What were your overall thoughts of him, and did he truly bring Pennywise to life? And if he was lacking in something, what was it?
Do you want to go, Alex?
I would like that's also geared towards Alex in regards to something that was lacking.
I think he was a great choice to play him, definitely. That he kind of added that comedic slant to Pennywise that I just didn't get in the book. I mean, this is me obviously looking at it as a purely fueled horror story. Was scary, of course he was, but I feel that he was more sort of quirky scary as opposed to like overtly terrifying. It was a great choice, definitely, in terms of Pennywise.
There is definitely a lot more humor in this movie in general. Even in the scary parts, there was more humor. I particularly love the scene where he takes Eddie's broken arm and pretends he's gonna bite it, and he's kind of making fun of Eddie being scared. But I think it's just Pennywise playing with his food, so to speak. You know, like I can tell he really enjoys hunting down these children and killing them, and he will enjoy it to the very end. I really did enjoy that. But you're right in a sense that maybe he doesn't seem as scary. I just find him so badass. I think he was such a great choice and did something so different with the character, and physically as well. I feel like he looks so huge next to these kids, and I don't know if it's the suit. I mean, he's very tall, but he just looks like he could overpower them at any moment. And again, I enjoyed the scary scenes with him, and I enjoyed the way he treated the kids, and there was always something so manic about him that I think it kind of balances out the humor a little bit. The same way I feel like the Joker had funny moments, but it's because he's crazy. You know, it's not because he's trying to make you laugh. It's because they're insane. And I felt that from Pennywise.
And to a certain extent, people always will smile when, and because of the fact that you mentioned the Joker, he's one of those kinds of characters that you know you are terrified of this guy, but you love how deliciously evil he is.
Yeah. Also, Bill Skarsgård, from what I've kind of gathered on the internet, he's given Pennywise certain sex appeal now as well.
Oh Lord!
Obviously, he didn't.
God.
he didn't obviously have that from the original TV miniseries, and he certainly did not have that from the book. So obviously, there's that whole element now. You know, people are attracted to Pennywise, which is things to think about.
I mean, you know, whatever you like, fine. I didn't get that though.
I've got nothing. I've
A
got
lot of
nothing
people
on
did,
that
though.
topic. I've got nothing. I didn't even know that. I mean, I don't know. Maybe it's just the appeal that maybe women just like a guy with makeup. I don't know.
I don't know.
This is something that Bill Skarsgård has brought to the character, and I don't know.
I mean, I don't know. I mean, there's lots of women at Kiss concerts, and they wear tons of makeup. So
this is very true. If that's your thing, it's your thing.
David Bowie, you know, like some girls like a guy that dolls himself up like that, I guess. Female, there's also tons of female juggalos, I guess, you know, for Insane Clown Posse. Who knows? Anyway, let's talk about a very crucial point of the story that actually, of course, involves Pennywise, and I'd really like to know your takes. Obviously, you will know which side to take, and that is photo album versus film projector.
Yeah. I think the photo album scene was much more sort of keep you up at night scary, whereas the film projector was very sort of like, it was jumpy horror, you know. Yes, it was scary, yes, it made me jump, but I think the way that blood just sort of seeps through Georgie's photo, and the way that obviously when he reaches into the photo and he gets his fingers all sliced up, I mean, that is truly horrifying to me, whereas opposed to, you know, him jumping out of the projector is just kind of like jump scare, which works, I guess, at the time. But I think the photo album definitely, it gives it that sort of otherworldly, almost sort of sepia toned classic horror touch to it, and the sort of horror that I will definitely keep thinking about again and again, and it will definitely keep me up at night. So that's why I think the photo album works better as a piece.
Hold on, I think Maria may have actually gotten signed out again.
When did that happen?
I don't know, but I just saw her go out. Like, yeah, she just dropped out.
Okay.
So we'll
see if we can get her back.
Well, I'm hoping that we'll get her back, but it's not a problem. We lasted this long. That is great. I mean, I know for a solid fact that the photo album is such a crucial part of the story, and to a certain degree, I was a little upset that it was missing. I do agree with you there, but I guess it's also because of the time period. You know, it's like a film projector is something that is just something that I guess for the time makes more sense. And yes, you're absolutely right. It's like like Goosebumps, hair standing up on the back of your neck, scary as opposed to genuine jump scare. That's something that could be something to debate about. But I personally feel that it was a very interesting modern take on it. I mean, I thought that it was still done very, very well because, like, at the same time, it's like, you know, do kids really bother looking at photo albums anymore? I mean, also to a certain extent, you know, one of the things about the photo album is that it does focus a lot more on Bill's story with Georgie.
Yeah,
because that's where he first finds
it does.
Yeah, and also let's talk about, we didn't really focus too much on it, but let's talk about the opening sequence. You know, like it's the most crucial, one of the most crucial parts of the book. Now that you actually see it in full form in the film, what did it take away from it? Did it add something to it?
I mean, it was actually very closely followed to what actually happens in the book. Yeah, I think that it was I think because I could sort of see it playing out. I mean, the book was very much in my mind when I went to see the film, so something like that to happen, and that is what happened, because it did stick very closely to all sorts of material. Yeah, I really enjoyed it, and I knew that as soon as that opening scene, you know, played out, I thought that this is going to be a really good horror film, and obviously you have that horrific.
Maria is back, and sideways.
Oh,
there we
sorry.
Go. There we go.
No, not now.
You're back. You're back. Okay, so
All right,
we
good.
basically, well, yeah, so that wasn't too terrible. We were just focusing. I gave my thoughts on the film projector. I personally, I mean, if you want to add some more to it, I think she may have gone back out again. Are you still
Nope,
here?
I'm here. I'm here.
Okay, good, good, good. Okay, I was basically saying that when it came to the projector as opposed to the photo album, I felt that it was a little bit better specifically for the time period. I was like, how many kids do in fact look at photo albums? I mean, to a certain extent they did, to a certain extent they don't. But also one of the few things that the photo album played a significant role was Bill's connection to Georgie. So my question to you is, what did you think of the film projector as opposed to the photo album with the seeping blood?
I don't think visually it's necessarily as great, you know, the fact that there's blood coming out of a picture. I think they did take elements from that whole scene and made it part of the movie. So for example, when he sees Georgie in the basement and Georgie kind of starts decaying and becomes this like creepy
Oh
looking
yeah,
thing, you know, that happens in the
yeah.
picture as well. So I think that visually was way more interesting. And then Pennywise doing that weird thing he did with his head running after Bill, that creeped me out so much. And I thought it was way better than, like we said, maybe looking at a photo album. I think the projector is cool because it's sort of like slowly changing, and then you start seeing Pennywise and it's creepy, and then it's dark, and then it keeps like, as it falls as well, it does a few more clicks. I preferred that a lot more than the photo album, even though it has a lot of meaning in the story.
Hmm. And we obviously, I think we can all agree that, because Alex basically said it perfectly, they didn't change the opening sequence one bit in regards to the death of
No.
Georgie.
Yeah.
But is it better but do you think it's better seeing it rather than reading it? That's another question that I would like to know.
Well, you know, I think this is a matter of what you did first. Did you watch the movie first or did you read it first? Because
Mm.
I, think the whole scene in the book is terrifying, honestly. And I know what's going to happen, and it's still terrifying because you are seeing it through Georgie's eyes, you know? And they tell you the last thing he thinks of or the last thing he feels. That being said, I was super impressed in the movie that they went all the way. Like, as soon as he bared his thousands of rows of teeth, and then Georgie didn't have an arm, I was like, damn, they really went for it.
Yeah, I'll tell you guys a little bit of a fun fact. I actually almost cried while watching that because I just knew that Georgie was going to go, and I like the little boy, even though he has such a small role, he was so cute and so innocent. I was like, oh my God, he is going to die. Like, no, no, no. Like, I was
It
waiting
was
for, like, I was like,
awful.
even though I knew it was going to happen, like, I was waiting for Batman to show up or something like that.
Every time. Every time I hear that part of the story, I'm waiting, oh, he's going to be fine. But then this actor, he was so darn cute. And then he did this thing with his tongue.
Yeah.
Like when he was trying to reach for it and he would like stick out his tongue. Like it was so much effort for him. I was like, oh, this is so sad.
And oh my goodness, Pennywise in that scene is so terrifying when he goes like, here.
I'd be like,
just
no,
like emphasizing.
you keep
I was
it,
like,
man.
wow, like that was fantastic. I did, and I loved how in the beginning when he first comes, yeah, and when he first comes up into the scene, he's like, hiya, Georgie. Like he actually sounds like goofy and funny, but then oh my God, like holy cow.
He did.
Like,
great.
I'm sorry. Tim Curry doesn't even hold a candle to Bill Skarsgård in regards to that scene anymore. I'm sorry. So let's talk about the Losers Club in regards to how they each individually view Pennywise for the first time. And I think one of the more interesting things that we probably want to touch about is how they changed Richie's view, because he is afraid of clowns.
Yeah, and yet he is the clown in the club. I mean, that's pretty interesting, right? Yeah, so obviously that raises up a ton of questions. I mean, is he scared of something within himself? Is that what it means? Or, what's going on there? But also, it touched on the whole reason why he was afraid of clowns. In the book, he's afraid of the monsters that he sees in films. He's afraid of the werewolf and all that. And we can see where that comes from because we know that he's seen the film. Whereas, at the point where we find out that he's afraid of clowns, he hasn't even seen Pennywise at this point. So where does that figure of clowns come from?
Now, you kind of broke up a little bit there, but I did actually understand what you were saying. You thought that
Me too.
Yeah, you pretty much were saying how ironically the fact that he is actually the clown of the group, and yet he is afraid of clowns. Yeah, and you felt that actually added something a little bit to it.
Yeah, and I also said that. Yeah, I didn't really see in the film where his fear of clowns comes from, because at that point he hadn't seen Pennywise, whereas in the book you can see where his fear of movie monsters comes from because he's seen the movies.
Yeah, I do think that was a little bit annoying for me in the movie. The fact that I totally get that Richie may be the last one to see Pennywise in the movie, and because he doesn't believe, because he's making fun of his friends, that's totally fine. But the fact that it just kind of was slapped on that he liked clowns, sort of like, oh, what are you afraid of, Richie? And he was like, clowns. I was like, oh man, you could have done something beforehand to show me that he was scared of clowns. I do love, however, that because he's the skeptical one, he gets this whole show from Pennywise, like this whole room full of clowns and outfits. I thought that was really good. It was like, oh, you don't believe that I exist? Well, here you go.
Yes, in your face, send in the clowns. He sent in the clowns. And there were a lot of things that were also changed, like obviously Mike's view changed, and Stan's, I think, changed in one of the weirdest of ways.
Really
I think they were all
weird.
different, weren't they? Except for Beverly's.
No, Beverly and Eddie's,
and
Billy and Eddie's, they were the same as well.
Eddie's is the same.
Oh yeah, you're right.
Yeah. I was actually very curious to see if they were going to keep that the same, because in the TV movie he is scared by shower heads coming to life like snakes.
Oh yeah.
Like, well, that doesn't make sense. Well, to a certain extent, it's like he's trying to get clean, so let the things that get him clean become the worst things that he has to encounter.
Yeah. No, I like that they kept it that he was afraid of the leper. I thought that was a good thing to do.
I think I was scared of the leper more than Pennywise at certain points.
yeah. But I know certainly with Stan's fear, he changed that because in the book he's afraid of in the standpipe, and in the film he's afraid of that that scary woman in the painting. And again, I didn't really see where that came from. He was just randomly afraid of it.
I actually really did like the change for Eddie, because I think it made it clear that we are all afraid of something maybe irrational as kids, and this painting freaks me out and I don't want to look at it, and then this thing is actually moving. One of the moments that scared me the most in the movie was when they're in the sewers and Eddie's by himself, and then you hear like these footsteps going really fast, and then it's the actual lady from the painting like going for him. I was like, Jesus! I was so afraid of that one-dimensional painting.
Yeah, you're referring to Stan, though, not Eddie. You were mixing up Stan with Eddie.
Did I say? Oh, yeah, sorry, Stan. My bad, Stan.
Yeah. And you're absolutely right. I mean, I know for a solid fact that, when we're little kids, we encounter something that is not necessarily meant to be scary, but because of the fact that it just hits us in a certain way. Like, a perfect example is my now 4-year-old niece. When she was little, she was scared of the Menomina song from The Muppet Show because she thought that the creatures were just very creepy looking.
No! Yeah, Muppets are creepy looking. Muppets are creepy looking.
Well, then blame Jim Henson for that, But that's what I'm saying. It's like there are things that when kids encounter them, it's because they just don't understand it. Like they don't know that it's meant to be something that's friendly, but we perceive it. So this could have been something that had just been haunting Stan for years, and we never knew.
Yeah, I did enjoy that.
Yeah, I was always curious because I was like, look at that, like that didn't happen in the book. But you want to know what was kind of funny? I didn't even remember what his fear was in the book.
Oh,
okay.
God. He was like in a house or something, wasn't it? And something was going for him. I don't think there's a specific creature. I don't remember.
Yeah, and the whole thing with Mike, the black bird is gone. It doesn't even exist.
Yeah.
in the movie.
Well, it does seem like that's something he inherited from his father's memory, wasn't it? Because again, I'm going back into the adult storyline because that's something that we don't really find out until.
Yeah, it is so. But in this case, it is a little bit relevant, because this is a crucial story for the kids.
I guess so. So yeah, he learns that, you know, his father, terrible fire, and fire, his father sees this big emerging out of it, and that's where his fear of birds comes from, and that's why he sees Pennywise as this huge bird, really absent from the film.
But in the case of the movie, it's a little bit different. It's sort of like he's feeling a little bit guilty about something that happened in his past.
Yeah. Well, he's afraid of the fire that apparently killed his parents in the film. Again, that's different in the book. So
Yeah.
Well, we are officially finished with this one, and I'm just going to let you guys know right now that the film destroyed the book in this case. And you want to know why it is? I think sometimes when you just see it up close, it's just something that adds a little extra dimension, you know?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, and considering the fact that and honestly, I will say this, just personally, that I feel that the funny factor of Pennywise, I personally think it added to the creep factor. Because like Maria said, he was playing with his food.
okay.
Yeah.
So now we're getting into the last category, and we're going a little bit over time, but you know something? We lost a few minutes because of the technical difficulty, so we have no reason to not go overboard here. So we're probably going to be here for another 10 or 15 minutes, probably a little longer or shorter, but we'll see. And that's going to be based on the climax, because right now we're tied up. So this is going to basically, we're tied up right now. It's two apiece, and we're going to go into the climax now. And I'm really curious to see how this one's going to go. And let's talk about a couple of focal points in regards to that. Let's talk about the one thing that is constantly occurring in the book and the film, and it ends up in fruition at the very end, and that is the whole thing with "You'll Float Too" and the deadlights.
Yeah.
Let's talk about how it is perceived in the book first, because I'd really like to see where this is going to go.
So obviously, "You'll Float Too" in the book is to system and where Pennywise is carrying out all of his terrible things. You get deadlights thing, which is a strong indication of where Pennywise comes from and his origin story, and the whole strangeness of that story, which we don't really get in the book. And it's incredible. Perhaps that's why they chose not to put it in the film. So interesting. It really is. When you get to that point in the book, you don't really know what to make of it. But I think this is one reason why it's the sort of book that deserves a reread, because I think you get something different every time you read it, and you will more on every reread. But it's so incredibly interesting, and that's one reason why I love Stephen King, because he comes out with these crazy outlandish ideas, but that are so interesting and just really, really make you think. So yeah.
Yeah, I've always related the floating thing with the balloons, so I still don't know his origin story. And in some ways, I feel like maybe telling origin stories kind of takes away mystery from a character. So for now, in this movie, I'm totally fine with not necessarily knowing everything about Pennywise. I think as an audience, you kind of accept that there's this spirit in the shape of a clown that kills children, and that's all I need to know. This is the problem. I don't need to know why he's doing it. I don't need to know what his motivation is. To me, this is fine. I have accepted this. I do kind of like that they linked the floating thing in the end with the children. It's nice to see visually something to do with those words that he constantly repeats and that Georgie tells Bill at some point. But I do feel like maybe it's not enough. It's just like, oh, so children are floating, okay, and now what, but at the same time, I'm happy that the origin story wasn't delved in too much, because then I think that maybe it takes away the fear of this character.
Mm-hmm. And of course, there's the whole idea of floating in between worlds, which I think you get a lot more in the book, because that other world is there. If you know what I mean? So I think there's that whole extra connotation with the book.
Right, absolutely. Let's also talk about that. Let's talk about the ritual of Chud.
Yeah.
What ritual of Chud? That's not in the movie. Yeah, I know of it, but definitely not from the movie.
Yeah, I mean,
exactly.
Yeah. Now, but it's in the book, but...
Yeah, it is.
But would that be something, the question really is, because I'm not giving my opinion in regard to it, but is it necessary? Does it add to this?
Well, I mean, in the book, I mean, that's how they discover how to defeat him. You know, that's how they get their knowledge of how to overcome their fear and how to overthrow the monster ultimately. So I think in terms of the book, yes, it is. But I totally understand because they took a slightly different route with the film. So I guess that's why they left it out.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, at least there were some nods to it because they obviously had the whole thing with the turtles.
Yeah.
Which I still don't get. I know the turtle is important, but I don't know. You know, I have no idea.
You'll get there.
Yeah, I'll get there in the book.
Yeah, you will, but the real question is going to be if you really think that it's something that's important to the story. I mean, you know, again, I can't say my piece here. I really cannot say my piece, but we'll do that at the end.
As far as I've gone, they've mentioned several times the turtle can't help us now. So I'm waiting for the turtle at some point, and maybe it's not important. Maybe because obviously it doesn't help them when they need to or something. I'm assuming it has nothing to do at the end when they defeat him. In the movie, it does feel like something is a little bit missing, and as someone who hasn't read that part, I can't tell you what it is, but I do feel like there should be something a bit more concrete to the way they defeat him. However, I think the movie builds up their friendship as the reason why they beat him, because, you know, together we're strong, and if we separate, we can do it. And they kind of do that when they get separated in the sewers, you know, that he can get them if they're separate, if they're afraid, but if they're together, they're stronger. So I think in a more subtle, indirect way, you can understand why they defeat him or, you know, manage to be stronger than him for a while. And the fact that he gets Beverly and Beverly says, "I'm not afraid of you anymore." You're like, oh, so it does have to do with fear. It does have to do with you overcoming something. You know, it's a battle of your wits, I think, of your fear and your courage. So even if it's not explicit, I kind of got that. I'm not sure if that has anything to do with the ritual of Chud.
Yeah.
Alex, just wanted to know if you want to say anything else. Yeah, there you go. Okay. Yeah, so at least there was some fan service. That's a good thing. I mean, I personally think that one of the things that we should have gotten more, we only got it once and it came from Pennywise, was Beep Beep Richie.
Yes.
Yeah.
I was really surprised why they took that away.
I don't know.
They put that in the film because, it's just... Yeah, I loved it. It's like a line that is constantly echoing in the book, and I really missed it in the film, definitely.
Mm-hmm. Right. So the last thing that we're going to discuss is something that is, I don't know whether it makes, it's so funny. You know, we take a look at, I'm going to throw politics in here a little bit. We talk about the current president of the United States, and we talk about how he is a sick, sick man. But then we read it, and we hear about this little thing at the very end that I refer to as the circle jerk.
Just a very little thing, no big deal.
Yeah, it's something that I heard about this book when I was 10 years old. My friend tells me, I read the book, he goes, dude, all these kids are going to have sex with each other at the end of the book. And I'm like, what? I was reading the book. I knew that it was going to happen. And then when I do it, I'm just like, Oh God, what the hell am I reading? Stephen King, you sick, twisted, perverted man, you. It's not in the movie! Good
Shocker,
or bad
I wonder
thing.
why. I wonder why.
Good or bad thing. And even though it's in the book, what is its purpose?
Alex, I can't wait for you to explain this.
I am dying here, Alex. It's your turn. talk about.
Okay, right. I am going to go with something that I mentioned earlier, the whole coming of age elements to it, the whole passage between childhood to adulthood and overcoming your fear. Because a lot of kids have a fear of adult things, including sex, and they have to bridge that gap between. And there are a lot of links, physical links, alluding to the bridge between these two stages of life. For example, literally the tunnel between the children's library and the adults' library, that whole tunnel, and the fact that people, walk past it and then watches them walk past it. And I think the whole scene where they are engaging in sex, it's Beverly's way, because obviously she has been abused by her father, and she has learned that she's learned, possibly subconsciously, that perhaps sex is the only way that she can be powerful, and that's what she uses in order to help the gang, I guess, in order to escape from the sewers. And that's why she comes up with this idea. She decides that that's literally the only way that they can get out, by becoming adults and doing a very adult thing, such as sex. And I think that's why it's in the book.
I mean, the way you say it makes a lot of sense, honestly.
You did. I am blown away, Alex. Well done. Well done.
Seriously, that was a hard one to defend.
That was
for
fantastic.
Sure.
Obviously, it would never get published now, but we have to remember this book was published in the 80s, and I think it's a book of its time in terms of that scene, definitely, obviously, because it would never ever get published now, because people are so,
Yeah, Stephen King is really lucky that his heyday was the 80s, because all the stuff he was able to get away with has been gotten away with, so it can't be undone anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the whole coming of age element is completely taken away from the film, so therefore that's another reason why it's not needed in the film.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's the other thing. I mean, obviously, Maria, I'd like you to give your take on it.
Well, it's a little hard because it's completely absent from the movie, and I think we've all made fun of this whole thing and this scene in the book because it seems so weird and out of context and unnecessary. I think, in my opinion, it's unnecessary. I'm sure in the middle of the story it makes sense. I mean, Alex totally sold me on it, but I don't think it's necessary to show their friendship and their bond, and I am glad that they didn't show it, because then that's all you're taking away from the movie. I mean, I'm certain of that. Like, if they had left that and then ended the movie, that's all you're going to talk about the movie. It wasn't going to be about how great the story was. It was going to be about what just happened in the middle of this thing. So I don't think it's necessary to tell such a great story. I do find it funny. Everybody has been kind of hounding Stephen King about it, like, oh, what do you think about this now, so many years later? And he said, like, yeah, he made a statement before he stood by it. And he said, I just think it's also funny that people are totally okay with somebody murdering children all over the book, but then have one problem with this one scene, which is basically consensual sex between friends, even if they are children.
That is true.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's about any number of child murders in that book. It's all about the fact that children had sex. Yeah, that
right,
people have a problem with. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, again, you're absolutely right. I mean, who knows? Like, did he do this for the sake of? To me, it sounds like, based on our conversation, like he really meant for it to be an important coming of age point rather than just shock value.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And there was a reason, yeah.
But the problem is, you show it today and no one's going to look at it but shock value. That's the problem.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Because we unfortunately live in this politically correct society right now, which I think is not doing any good service for anybody at this point in time. And it's just, to a certain extent, it prevents you from really getting your message out, whatever your message may be. But at the same time, you know, when you take a look at how much knowledge we have gained and we feel what is appropriate, what's not appropriate at these days and age, you know, would something like this still fly? We just don't know. That's the thing. We don't know. I guess it's not in the movie because there's just so many people who have read the book that just don't like it, you know?
Yeah, I can understand that. And in this is one of the cases where maybe it's better to read it than to see it. Like, it would probably make more sense. And I haven't gotten to that part yet because it's closer to the end of the book, but I'm sensing something between all of them and Beverly. Like, everybody has like something with Beverly, and it's not dirty, it's not, you know, adult feelings, but there is something blooming between all of them. And so I can see where he's kind of going with it. But so it's definitely not out of the blue, in my opinion, so far. But yeah, if you just randomly talk about it and put it in this movie, people would not be on board with it. I mean, I don't think I would have enjoyed watching it either.
Yeah, I mean, like, I think,
Yeah.
I mean, personally, as someone who always likes to take a look at films and see how something could have been done, maybe it would have been okay if, you know, they actually just showed her taking off her clothes and then just fade to black and let everything just be guessed toward the imagination. However, what about the blood oath? Was it an okay replacement, or does it not really bring that coming of age factor to the characters?
I mean, you know, obviously it creates the bond between them. They do slice their palms open in the book. You know, that is the only thing between them. Because obviously, you know, sharing blood and having sex is somewhat similar, I guess. As in, you know, you are sort of, you know, eternally bonded to those people and all the rest of it. But you can see why they just used that as for the film, definitely. Obviously, they didn't want to allude to the fact that. So yeah.
Yeah, I think speaking of like a coming of age story, which Alex was mentioning, this scene probably does for them. I think every character individually shows that they have grown. You know, Beverly says no to her father and is leaving. Eddie confronts his mom and says, you know, you've always kept me this way. Stan, not so much. You know, Bill confronts his fear of Georgie and the fact that he was responsible and overcomes that. There's like little things like that that make you feel like a chapter is over, you know, something has been finished or resolved. And I do like that as well. You know, I do feel like there is a sense of them growing up in the movie.
Okay. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we've officially wrapped this up, and the film takes it.
No, I don't even believe it.
Yes, it does, and it's all because.
Neither do I.
No, I'm telling you one thing. I'm not gonna lie. This is a total of 4-1 in favor of the movie.
Oh.
And it was the circle jerk that got the book its point. Because Alex
it's not your fault. I'm
no,
sorry.
Alex, you did a wonderful job. That was brilliant. I was really curious to see how you were going to take that topic.
It took a lot of thinking about, definitely, but I fully believe that was King's intention. So.
But anyway, you know, the battle is still not over yet. So Maria can hold the torch for a little while because part 1 officially goes to her. So she gets the crown or the championship belt, whatever it is for the day. And I'm just hoping that there will be no problems with getting the second film to the public when they officially give it its destined time. And we will hopefully meet each other here again in 2 years, and continue this battle and discuss the second part of the film.
I will gladly carry the torch for 2 years. I have no problem with that.
And I'm glad to know that the both of you are willing to actually return and fill your roles. I mean, I know that life is life, things can change. I'm totally comfortable with that, but for now, I'm glad to know that the both of you are still choosing to be on board. It makes me feel really glad that you both enjoyed yourselves here today.
Of course, I had a lot of fun. And if the kids can come
Yeah.
back 27 years later, we can do 2 years. I mean, that's nothing.
Good point. Good point.
Exactly. Yeah.
Anyway, so before we all sign out for the day, of course, I'm going to want the two of you to just let everybody know where you can be found. I will let the victor of the day begin.
Well, you can find me if you go to youtube.com, CineClub channel. That's where I post my videos, reviews. I haven't done anything in a while because the electricity is a problem here, as you know. But my latest video was actually about it, and I compared Tim Curry and Bill Skarsgård. So if you want to go see that, it's been doing really well. And you can leave me your vote in the comments, which one you preferred, Tim or Bill.
Yeah, and Maria and I have also, I mean, you both have done 10 for 12s with me, which is wonderful.
Yes.
So the fact that we actually, well, actually, Alex is about to do a 10 for 12 with me. So that's actually awesome. Yeah, she's about to do it this in November, so keep an eye out for that one, Maria. Maria and I did 10 for 12, which was 10 movie sequels that surpassed their originals. That was a lot of fun. It was nice to know that we both shared, I think we shared number 1. That was pretty awesome.
Did we? Which one was it? I don't remember. It's been a
while. I think we both chose The Godfather Part 2.
There you go. It has to be.
Yeah,
You know
absolutely, absolutely, yeah. All right, so Alex, please let everybody know where you can be found.
Alex's Fiction Addiction on YouTube. I am mostly a booktuber, but I am starting to do some more film and TV stuff. I'm also on Twitter, Instagram, Tumblr, and Goodreads, and I always leave all of my links at the end of all of my videos, so you can always find me on all of those too.
Excellent. And just so you both know, and let's let everybody else know, because I would really like this little show to get around, because there's big plans for Versus next year. I've got 5 episodes in the works. 4 right now have officially been decided, but there will probably be a 5th one somewhere down the line. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to be taking this video down in a couple of minutes, because I'm going to download it and I'm going to add the intro and outro to it. And then I'm going to put this, and I'm going to share this with the both of you on Google Share Drive, so you both can copy it and put it onto your respective channels. I would really I would really like the both of you to get this onto your channels and let this go around and really try and get more people interested in doing more of these battles, because there's so many more things to talk about. There's so many great battles to continue on when it comes to books, movies, or even just TV shows versus TV show, movie versus movie, etc., etc. But for the time being, Alex, Maria, thank you so much for joining me today. Thank you all for watching today. This was so much fun. The technical difficulties did not destroy us. We were strong. Yeah, thank goodness. So for the time being, everybody, that's all we have for today. Please leave your comments in the box below. And to all of you, have a wonderful and safe Halloween. For now.
Bye-bye.